LAPD will protect our immigrant community. LAPD officers will not take action to determine a person's immigration status and will not arrest someone for their status. And LAPD will not assist with mass deportations. Los Angeles is a city of immigrants, and I know immigrants are being disparaged right now, but I want the people of Los Angeles to know my viewpoint. Our nation was built by immigrants, and LA, such an extraordinary city, because of the people here from literally all over the world.
I'm not in favor of sending the Army in uniforms into our cities to collect people. I think it's a terrible image, and that's not what we use our military for. We never have, and it's actually been illegal for over 100 years to bring the Army into our cities. Army and our military are trained. They're not trained to get a warrant to do what they're doing. The police have a difficult job, but the people removing people from our country need to be a police enforcement domestic agency, not the military. While I'm all for remain in Mexico, I will not support an emergency to put the Army into our cities. I think that's a huge mistake.
We also want to make sure that there isn't a violation of people's rights with, raids, for example, that are done in coordination with local law enforcement on people who are, frankly, holding down jobs and have been in this country for many, many years. We think that's improper. And in Illinois, that's not something that we would condone. There's been some talk about using other states' National Guard, red state National Guards to somehow come into a blue state and try and enforce these new Stephen Miller-inspired rules. And that's just not something we're going to accept. But
if the Trump administration requests it, would the Massachusetts State Police assist in mass deportations?
No, absolutely not. But, let me say this. I do think it's important that we all recognize that there's going to be a lot of pressure on states and state officials. And I can assure you, we're going to work really hard to deliver. Some realities also need to be, noted. And that is, in 2016, we had a very different situation in the courts. And while I'm sure there may be litigation ahead, there's a lot of other ways that people are going to act and need to act for the sake of their states and their residents. There's regulatory authority and executive powers and the like. There's legislation also within our states. So I think that the key here is that, every tool in the toolbox has got to be used to protect our citizens, to protect our residents, and protect our states, and certainly to hold the line on democracy and the rule of law as a basic principle, right?
This is a message to Donald Trump. Hey, Trump, you see all these folks behind me, all hard-working Mexican Americans? I know we all look alike to you, but these folks were born and raised here and working hard to make our economy grow. And the migrants that sometimes come alongside and work with these folks, whether it's this industry or the meatpacking or any other, they're here because they know how to work. You've never worked a day in your life, and you don't know what it takes to build this country. So you can take your work site raids that you and Tom Homan want to do and go shove them up your ass. Because at the end of the day, our economy is driven by people like this and by migrants and by so many others that simply want to come out here and come into this country and do well for themselves and their families.
Welcome back. Our special guest this morning is LA County Sheriff Robert Luna. First off, Sheriff, thanks for joining us. Always a pleasure to have you.
Good to be here with you.
So we're talking a bit about immigration. It's in the forefront post-election. Los Angeles is starting to move the process along to become a sanctuary city. The LA City Council just passed an ordinance unanimously that limits helping the federal government enforce immigration laws. Now, that's the city of LA. We're talking about the county of LA. How does this affect what you might be able to do in working with ICE if you are in LA City?
So Los Angeles County, being part of the state of California, we're not changing much of anything of what we do. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department does not enforce civil immigration enforcement, or we don't do enforcement on civil immigration. So we'll continue to do what we do. And that means, and that's important because there's a lot of rhetoric out there. I don't want people to be afraid to call the Sheriff's Department when they need something. If they're a witness to a crime, if they're a victim to a crime, they need to call us. We don't and will not start asking people about their immigration status. That becomes very important. Public trust here is paramount to a safe neighborhood, this partnership that we desire to have. If we start doing work with immigration, that is detrimental to that relationship, and it actually violates current state law, SB 54.
But is that unilateral? And I say that because there are exceptions, aren't there? If the person immigration is looking for is a known felon or a violent person, would you help in that circumstance, or are you just limited in, I can't help in certain places? I mean, it seems a blanket statement to never help is also probably not what you're talking about.
No, I mean, the law is pretty clear that we're not to go out and initiate the activity. Local law enforcement's job is not civil immigration. Now, if somebody at the federal government, one of the agencies, is asking for help, we will assist if they need help. We would do that for any law enforcement agency. But it does get very technical in regards to when we do or do not help. But what our community needs to know is don't be afraid to call the Sheriff's Department. We are not going to ask you about your immigration status. About a third of our population are immigrants, and a large portion of that are undocumented. It would be a huge strategic error for us to start using local law enforcement to enforce civil immigration laws.
Well, and that is, it seems, there are two sides to this. One side is saying that we're terrified that there's going to be this mass deportation, people are going to be knocking on doors, and that the sheriff might help with that. Then there are the other people who are worried that the sheriff wouldn't help at all if immigration is looking for somebody who is potentially violent. Neither of those are true, right?
Neither of them are true. We are not going to help in any sweeps or deportation of what we call just normal working folk that are here. Like my family, it's the background I come from. But if you have anybody who is negatively impacting our community, committing violent crimes, we're going to do everything we can to get those individuals off the street. If you become aware of that, let us know. We have our normal state laws that we enforce, so we are still going to keep dangerous criminals off the street.
And very quickly, we have a new police chief now. You know Jim McDonald very well. We have just a couple of minutes here, or a couple of seconds. I'm sure you're looking forward to being able to work with him.
He's a great partner. I've worked with him in Long Beach. I've worked with him over the years. He has a great deal of respect across the country as one of the top executive law enforcement personnel. Him and I are going to make great partners with the rest of our partners here in Los Angeles County in law enforcement.
Sheriff Luna, thank you very much.
Plans by the Trump administration to begin the mass deportation of millions of undocumented people is setting off alarm bells in Little Village and other communities with large immigrant populations.
So we are terrified with those threats of deportation.
Pastor Emma Lozano, who famously provided sanctuary at her Humboldt Park Church for Elvira Arellano nearly 2 decades ago, is calling on President Biden to act now.
To give temporary protection status for those people that have been living here for decades, paying taxes, possibly married to U.S. citizens or have U.S. citizen children or dreamer children.
The Johnson administration is preparing to do all it can to protect families with undocumented members. The deputy mayor for immigrant, migrant, and refugee rights says Chicago will not be bullied because of its welcoming city ordinance.
We are not able to cooperate with ICE to assist in mass deportations. Our mayor has made very clear that he will not flinch. We will continue to maintain our ordinance in place and to comply with that.
One of the biggest concerns is if deportations separate families.
This idea that he's only going to deport on day one people who are undocumented, who have a criminal record, is an absolute lie.
Watch what happens when that debate begins. People are going to come to their senses and leave some of this rhetoric behind them. They're going to say, yes, dangerous people, get rid of them. For God's sake, don't tear that family apart.
Community leaders like Emma Lozano believe that if mass deportations start hitting home in Chicago, churches may need to step up to provide families with sanctuary.
Watch breaking news on YouTube. Subscribe to ABC7 Chicago Eyewitness News.
And she is standing by her comments that she told us on OTR just a few days ago. The mayor saying she doesn't need the federal government's help causing fear through mass deportations.
It is the
Boston Mayor Michelle Wu doubling down on refusing to cooperate with President-elect Trump's plan for mass deportations.
We have laws on the books that ensure that we do not cooperate on civil immigration detainers.
Sunday on OTR, I asked Mayor Wu what Boston's response would be if mass deportations happen.
We are not cooperating with those efforts that actually threaten the safety of everyone by causing widespread fear and having large-scale economic impact.
So she helps us, she gets the hell out of the way.
President-elect Trump's border czar fiercely criticizing the mayor in the wake of her comments.
Well, she's not very smart, I'll give her that, because what I just said is President Trump's going to prioritize public safety threats. What mayor or governor doesn't want public safety threats out of their communities? I mean, that's their number one responsibility, is to protect their communities, and that's exactly what we're going to do.
What's your response? Look, people can say whatever they want about me. This isn't about me. Our public safety record speaks for itself. We are the safest city in America, the safest major city in America here in Boston.
Boston has the Trust Act. Police don't ask about immigration status or share information with ICE, but they do work with federal law enforcement on certain crimes.
Human trafficking, drug trafficking, child exploitation, cyber crimes.
Local Republicans say the mayor is wrong.
The city of Boston should be working with the federal government hand in hand to follow the law.
Now, President-elect Trump's border czar is promising the biggest mass deportations in history, but even he acknowledges it's unclear how it will work and how much funding he'll get from Congress to, in fact, do this. We're live in Boston. Sharmitz Kitty, WCVB News Center 5.
Also, right now, several cities across America are promising to push back and defy President-elect Trump's plans for mass deportations. It's one of his biggest campaign promises. Well, Denver's Democratic Mayor Mike Johnston predicting a Tiananmen Square type situation with residents rising up against the federal government. That movement was a series of large political protests in China back in 1989. So what does this mean for the president-elect's plans at the local level? News Nation's Xavier Walton joins me now. Xavier, how can these sanctuary cities refuse to cooperate with this new incoming administration?
Hey, Marky, good morning. Essentially, what these city leaders are saying is that the White House and President-elect Donald Trump, when he gets to the White House, will not have authority to do so with some of their local National Guards. We're going to get to that in just a second. But we're going to get back to what you just talked about. Really bold words coming from the mayor of Denver. And if he holds true, keeps his words when President-elect Donald Trump takes office, we could be heading for a collision course. So we're talking about Mayor Mike Johnston, a Democrat, says city police won't be assisting in mass deportation efforts, and residents in Denver support his decision. Johnston, like you just mentioned, even comparing that potential for public resistance to the upcoming federal immigration operation to the 1989 Tiananmen Square protests in China. We all know how that ended. It certainly got our attention, a bold comparison. Meantime, other sanctuary cities like Los Angeles, Chicago are bracing for mass deportation efforts as well under the new administration. In LA, Mayor Karen Bass saying, you know what, this moment demands urgency after city council there reaffirmed its sanctuary city status. The governor of Illinois, J.B. Pritzker, a Democrat, saying earlier this week he is deeply concerned and questioned whether the president of the United States even has the authority.
There are two different provisions of the act that authorizes the use of the National Guard, Title 10, Title 32, and he doesn't have, under either one of those, the ability to call the National Guard out, again, in the United States of America.
Okay, so there's a question over who has the authority. President-elect Trump has vowed to start deportation efforts on day one. We've heard this repeatedly. His plan aims to target an estimated 11 million undocumented immigrants in the United States. Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, says federal agents are going to carry out their duties regardless of local resistance. Here's why.
It just makes sense. There's no downside in a secure border. And I have arguments a lot of on Capitol Hill. Give me one downside in a secure border. What's the downside in less illegal immigration? What's the downside in less fentanyl that killed 250,000 people? What's the downside in less sex trafficking of women and children, which is up now 600%? What's the downside unless people on terrorist watch lists coming across the border? A secure border saves lives.
So, Mark, you could be heading for a collision course. Remember, Trump's inauguration day will be, it's a little less than 2 months away from today. So we're going to have to watch and wait and see how it all plays out from now to then, Marky.
Yeah, January 20th. We'll be watching closely. Xavier Walton, thank you so much.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Go to joinnn.com to find News Nation on your television provider. Also, don't forget to click that red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.
So Governor Greg Abbott wants to make sure that Houston, the city of Houston, is put under the same microscope as any city that isn't allowed legally to be the quote-unquote sanctuary city. And this is what we do here in the city of Houston. People come into the city of Houston illegally. They're allowed to stay. There is only so much that our law enforcement officers are willing to do, that the DEA is willing to do, that the border agents are willing to do. Why in the world don't we go after those that are here? Well, that's what Abbott wants to change, and I agree. And as soon as we make sure that in the state of Texas, if Houston keeps conducting itself the same way that San Antonio and other cities conduct themselves, then no money is coming to Houston from the state. We need to do that on a state level. We also need to do it on a federal level.
But Matt, my problem with this is, why are we so worried about getting rid of all of the Mexicans or Hispanics that are quote unquote here, if they're illegal or not? At the end of the day, many of them are paying taxes. Many of them have been here for generations and decades. And Matt, trying to get rid of 4 or 5 or 3 million people all at once is not going to work. We don't have the resources
We
for
don't
it.
have to do it all at once.
And secondly, Matt, listen, there is no such thing as an illegal Mexican immigrant coming into Texas because they're only coming home. Texas, Arizona, and California was stole from the Mexicans.
Don't start
this
that
all
nonsense.
belonged
Don't
to
start
them.
that
So they're
nonsense.
only coming home, and then here it is, you white folks stole the land from the Indians, but yet you're the natural, real illegal immigrant.
So let's start with the things you said that are already wrong. First of all, they're coming here. They're not paying any taxes. You're telling me they're paying taxes? They're not paying taxes because nobody knows who the heck they are. No, they're not paying any taxes.
Matt, when they buy a product, they paying a tax on it.
Let's continue
When they
on.
buy a car, they paying a tax on it.
You come into this country illegally. That is a law that you're breaking, and that's why they have to be sent back to wherever they came from. They want to come through the front door. That is the correct way to come in. And the city of Houston has to stop allowing this, or we're never going to get them to stop coming in here. Look,
Matt,
that's what we got to do. Follow the law.
But Matt, where is the compassion that the indigenous Indians had for white people in this country?
Why do you keep going backwards?
They let you all come in.
What are you going
and you
backwards
came in
for?
and raised a whole lot of hell.
Don't start.
Trump,
Don't
Trump
start
called
bringing up
Mexicans
history to try and
rapists. He
explain
called
what's
them
going on
criminals.
today.
Trump called the Mexicans illegal criminals coming into America. Well, the biggest illegal criminal ever come into America was white people.
So you don't give a damn if people break into this country?
I don't give a damn.
I wonder what's going to happen when they come rob your house.
I don't give a damn about hypocrites who came here illegally and stole all of this and now want to blame them before only coming back home. To all of the Mexicans, don't worry about this. Just keep having babies, and in 30 years, all these white folks will be under your control.
To Americans, let's stand up and do what the hell we're supposed to do and stop letting the city of Houston be an open door. This ain't no sanctuary city.
Don't listen to that.
This is a real city.
Just keep having babies, and at the end of the day, you'll run everything in Texas. Just keep having babies.
Now you understand why I got to come here every single week, and I gotta go after this man and maybe get through that thick skull one day.
In 20 years, you're gonna be the minority in Texas.